This is a podcast recording for Third Sector Collaboration Week. Third Sector Collaboration Week aims to raise awareness of collaboration and the different methodologies or approaches that can be used to develop new partnerships. The week will also demonstrate the power of networking as well as how collaboration can lead to greater innovation. Each day of the week focuses on how collaboration can deliver on key Scottish Government policy areas. These include procurement, community wealth building, climate action, COVID recovery, and we'll also be looking at international examples of collaboration. The week is being organised by Partnership for Procurement, otherwise known as P4P, with support from Social Enterprise Network Scotland and a number of place-based and thematic social enterprise networks. P4P supports social enterprises and the wider third sector to develop new partnerships, building capacity on collaboration and helping to increase the number of enterprising third sector organisations successfully bidding for contracts. This podcast features a discussion between myself, Neil Young, and Naomi Johnson from Social Enterprise Scotland. Thanks for agreeing to take part in today's podcast for Third Sector Collaboration Week. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Neil. Great to be here, and thank you for asking me.
No problem. It was nice to get out and about for a wee bit today after heavy monsoon season in Glasgow the last few days. I don't know if it was the same where you are.
No, not too bad. We've got the sun. I always say the sun's shining in Dumfries and Galloway, but it's not all the time. But it's beautiful right now, so I'll keep looking out the window and smiling at that.
So firstly, just can you introduce yourself and speak a bit about your role at SES?
Of course. So, well, I guess I've worked in social enterprise frighteningly now, I think, for around 25 years. So, yep, I would say I'm older than I look, but obviously it's a podcast, so you can imagine me as incredibly young.
You're 21, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I started out in kind of the waste and recycling sector, and I guess the relevance for some of the work here, and I guess for what you do, is in my early days, that was very much about the preparation of tender responses and pricing, and then I moved into more of a supportive role. So I moved to Scotland in 2007, because you've probably picked up my slight Midlands undertones in my voice, and I moved to set up social enterprise agency First Port. So and now I work freelance in the social enterprise sector here in Scotland, but I do a lot of work with Social Enterprise Scotland and have been leading their work on the Buy Social Scotland campaign. So yeah, that's what brings me here and brings me to chat to you today.
Great, thank you. So social enterprise veteran. Is it safe to say that, or is that revealing your age? Is that what's going on?
I think veterans too much, but I've kind of been around, I think, both as a practitioner and as someone in the support scene for some time. And like I say, I've been in Scotland since 2007, so I think I've got a pretty good grounding, and have been at the coalface as well, which I think is always good when you're kind of doing a lot of the support work.
Yeah, so, I mean, I suppose my background, I've worked with both, intermediaries and worked with within social enterprise themselves, and having that kind of both sides of it can be useful.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell me a bit about the Buy Social Corporate Challenge? I know you just mentioned the Buy Social campaign there.
Yeah, so well, Social Enterprise Scotland first launched kind of Buy Social Scotland in late 2019. At that point, it was building on a kind of global campaign established by Social Enterprise UK. And in its initial phase, we focused much more on social enterprises that were selling products and experiences to the consumer market. And then in early 2020, we started to look much more at supply chain opportunities. And that really is where kind of the corporate challenge part of the work came from. So the corporate challenges was set up initially to get 10 companies signed up to spend £1 million through social enterprise suppliers here in Scotland by 2022. So it's an aggregate total. otherwise we're not asking them to spend 10 million, but maybe we'll get there one day. We like to be aspirational. But it's very much an initiative designed to kind of encourage and support companies to look at social supply chains and create those opportunities for social enterprises on the ground.
And can you expand a bit more on kind of why it was established? I know that there's been a predecessor program in England.
Yes, so the predecessor program in England, I think, has been going for 5 years now, and I might come back to that a little bit when we look at kind of, I'll talk a bit about what we took from that program and how we changed it, I guess, for Scotland a little bit. But it's really been set there to raise the profile more of social enterprise suppliers, to understand, I guess, where barriers might exist in developing supply relationships, and to work with, I guess, both social enterprises and businesses to try and overcome those barriers and, in essence, create more trading opportunities for social enterprise and more ways, I guess, for business to connect with organisations in their area or organisations that can help them meet particular social and environmental goals. So I guess it's come about, you'll know yourself through work with P4P, that social enterprise and procurement, particularly with the public sector, has been around for some time. But I think as we're seeing contracts get bigger, often some of those opportunities fall out of being part of the supply chain rather than the direct provider. So we're trying to make sure that all of those opportunities are covered as we move forwards.
Yeah, no, it can be quite difficult to promote working with kind of large corporates or private sector organizations, maybe just due to the lack of engagement often between social enterprises and the private sector.
I think it's, and I guess this is one of the key parts really of my role to some degree, in the role of Social Enterprise Scotland in the Corporate Challenge, is almost trying to provide an easy gateway for businesses to have that initial engagement, because even as someone that works in the sector, it's sometimes quite difficult to keep up to date with who's doing what, who's providing what, where they're based as companies grow and expand and new organisations come on board. So just finding social enterprises can be a challenge, I think, if you're not. It can be a challenge if you're part of the sector. So it's even greater challenge, I think, when you're outside of that a little bit. So I think it's really about, gatekeeper's the wrong word, because that implies keeping people out as well as keeping people in. This is very much an open door, I think, and are trying to make it easy for encouraging those partnerships from both sides.
Okay, and are there particular, like, longer term objectives that you're trying to achieve?
Well, obviously I said that we started by talking about having 10 companies signed up. We obviously want to expand on that. So we're going to be looking to bring in more kind of organisations that are interested in social enterprise supply chain in the next year and ongoing, I guess. We're also very much looking at how we put out more kind of marketing materials on behalf of the whole sector. So again, we know that often marketing budgets in individual social enterprises can be quite tight at times. So we're trying to produce resources that will really promote the sector as a whole in terms of supply chain. So we're looking to do some animations we can share on LinkedIn. We're looking to build a directory that gives a sense of products in terms of who people currently provide services for, what they can offer. So really looking at doing that as we move forward. So there's a lot going on. And I guess as we move forward, it's all going to be very much about continuing to respond to need and demand on both sides as much as we can.
Okay, thanks for that. Are the corporates already, like, in place, or are you still having to kind of find them? Or
so we've got some in place. Obviously I said we're looking to get more on this year. So it's fair to say trying to launch a programme in the year that's has been quite tough. A couple of our businesses, for instance, are hospitality orientated. Now, at the point when we actually got them on board with the programme, hospitality was still very much a closed shop for many. So that's been quite tough, I think. And again, I think the businesses themselves have been trying to work out what their own position in the market's going to be. So again, we've had some higher education organisations involved, but they weren't sure how much students were going to be on campuses even. So I think they're the challenges we've had in getting people on board, and it's taken longer, I think, than we anticipated to get our initial 10, but we have got most of those on board, and we are building on that now as we move forwards.
Okay, and do they have to make like a particular pledge of a spend, or?
So we obviously talk about that target with them in terms of the aggregate total, and we're working with them on getting, I guess, an informal sign up to that sense of a target. But again, I guess part of the way we've had to have those conversations with them in the last year have also been trying to understand that against the whole context of trading during the pandemic and understanding that. So yes, we get them to pledge a spend towards the aggregate total, but we're equally having to kind of bear in mind that some things could suddenly change if lockdown came in again, or as businesses have controls moving forward. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be having these conversations, but the willingness, I think, is most certainly there. And in a strange way, albeit the last year's created quite a challenging environment for them, there's a real sense of wanting to sign up and make those connections moving forwards.
Oh, that's great to hear. It is very difficult to plan just now, although maybe it is getting a bit better. And as we're recording this so-called, I mean, it's technically Freedom Day. I hate to use that term, but never know.
Yes, it's a strange one, isn't it? But a very cautious freedom, perhaps. But I think, yeah, hopefully one where we have got trade going on. In essence, I guess whether you're a social enterprise or a private business, you need to be trading. So it's something we all need to be considering as we move forwards.
Well, thanks for that. And as you know, as this podcast is for Collaboration Week and P4P, we focus on collaboration in various different forms. How do you think the Corporate Challenge promotes collaboration?
It's all about collaboration. I mean, what business isn't all about collaboration? I think these days, this is very much, we've tried to make sure that even in terms of when we launched the challenge, we'd already undertaken some independent research to try and understand those challenges that people might have and understand how we can overcome barriers. So that's about how do we strengthen our collaboration with corporate partners within the sector itself. I guess the podcast is another great example, working with organisations like yourself, with P4P, with other social enterprise leaders. So it's very much collaboration in that sense. And also collaborating with the social enterprises, getting them on board, but actually at the time when we're collating a directory, hopefully talking with them about how they get their messages across in a stronger way. So that I think all of this will get strengthened if we're all working together on those same goals, but doing it in a way where we're all encouraging each other. So businesses are encouraging social enterprises perhaps in the way that they need to look at how they operate, but we're encouraging businesses in the way that they need to think about broader targets as well. So yeah, collaboration is at the heart of it.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and it's good to hear that as well. And I mentioned that there's been obviously a kind of a predecessor program or similar program in England. So I just wanted to ask if there's any particular lessons that have been learnt from the English program, which will then be kind of adopted or kind of maybe changed in the Scottish program.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really strong social enterprise sector here in Scotland, but I think we also have to recognise that the businesses that we have here, the social enterprise businesses that is, will be different perhaps to some of the ones over the border. So I guess some of the lessons if we look at the corporate challenge on a UK level, it's very much working with with larger corporate organisations. We've tried to be open. Yes, we've got some of those larger organisations on board, but we're also trying to make sure that in our marketing materials we're as much talking or making our messages as relevant to small, medium enterprises, SME markets, as well as just some of those bigger players, because Scotland's a smaller place. I think the connections that we make here are done in a slightly different way. People tend to know each other, particularly when you start talking to procurement teams from one company. They may well know procurement teams in another company just because they used to work there. So I think actually we can make all of that work to our advantage here in Scotland. And I think that can be really helpful. But it also means that in the way that we're going out to our businesses, our social enterprises are different. So how we're looking at what we say the sector can offer is also important. So we've been very keen to make sure that we can talk quite broadly about, in our consumer day, we talked about gifts and experiences, for example, for those kind of social enterprises that run activities. And again, we're building that in terms of team building days, whatnot. So we're talking much more about some of the one-off opportunities as well as the longer term supply relationships, because I think we have to have that flexibility here in a slightly smaller market. I
can imagine, in Scotland, we can be a bit more agile and kind of quick to react.
I think, well, if we're dealing with smaller companies, the challenge is the larger the company, often the more layers you have to go through on procurement decisions. So I think, if we're talking to some smaller companies, hopefully we get a little bit of that kind of pace of foot a little bit more that enables things to happen more quickly. But it's about getting the right fit depending on the company. Again, we're working with some companies up here that are much more the larger corporates following sometimes UK-wide rules in terms of their own procurement guidance. So we're having to balance those two things. But I'd like to think that we can get to know our sector quite well here in a smaller place, and we can help introduce those opportunities, I guess, across a number of different social enterprise organisations.
On that kind of note, what types of social enterprise services or products are being supplied? Because I can imagine a lot of the people that would be listening to this podcast, first of all, they'd be very interested, but also they might be wondering, well, is what I can supply, is that wanted by those organizations? Or
it is interesting. I mean, certainly some of the requests that we're getting through, we don't know social enterprises that can fulfill some of those supply needs. So I think there's definitely gaps out there. We're trying to, again, keep it very broad. So when our directory launches, people will see we've got things based on kind of corporate gifting and experiences through to office and building services, whether that's office needs or cleaning and maintenance services. Employability is often quite big. But again, some of our companies are even asking us, mental health's become really important over the last year. So in a funny way, I actually think my sense as we've started this program is we started perhaps with quite a sense of needing to focus on the very traditional things that we might think of in a supply sense first, but actually in our conversations with some of the companies, they're the ones saying, well, actually, what about mental health? What about offerings that perhaps sit slightly differently? So I think they're being quite broad about the kind of things that we look. I mean, the key message that we're trying to get out to social enterprises that want to be here is the key thing that we do get back is quality is really important, reliability is really important, and they're the key things in terms of supply. So it's not that they're looking for something particular, but they are always looking for quality and reliability.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. So you've not really spotted any particular trends yet in the types of things being asked for, or?
Of the businesses we've got signed up for on the corporate challenge, I mean, we've got some from construction, we've got some from hospitality, some from academia. So the challenges of what they all need are different. Catering is an obvious one that comes through in a number of different ways, and we've got a lot of social enterprise companies that can do that. So I think that's always an obvious, but we're trying to make sure that we go out to some of the less obvious, or at least for me, the directory is as much about planting the seeds of what might be there as a possible supply chain, and not just going to, we know within our sector, you know, there's a couple of the big organizations that have, whether I'm thinking of kind of, you know, the road signs, the uniforms, we've got catering, we've got office supplies. So all of those are there, but we're trying to make sure that there's an opportunity where we can for other social enterprises, as long as they meet that kind of quality and reliability side, to get involved in the initiative and not just keep it as a kind of a closed shop, I think, and not jump to conclusions about what people are looking for, but show them what's on offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So I mean, that we're trying to change perceptions really in a way about what social enterprises can offer.
I think so, yeah. I mean, the key demands will always be there, I think, and they will always, I guess, be the lead in terms of the obvious things that companies need. This is very much about getting them to buy what they need and do that in a good way. But I think if we can kind of give some of those alternatives, particularly around things like the corporate gifting market, the event scene, and just some of those services that might not automatically spring to people's minds. And when thinking about social enterprise, then, you know, that can set a seed for the future in terms of procurement and buyers, but it could also start to send signals back into the sector about, the new businesses that people are, or the supplies that people are looking to purchase, that could provide real opportunities for social enterprise organisations to develop into. So I think, again, if we came across lots of very similar requests, would it start to stimulate an idea of kind of new ideas that we should be trying to get off the ground that could have a real social enterprise angle, but still be meeting supply chain? We're not at that stage yet with this initiative, but I'd love to think that we could be getting that stimulation of the market happening from both sides.
Long-term goals.
I think it's good to have the long-term goals in place. Yeah, they're definitely long-term goals, I think.
I think it does beg the question, what's in it for the kind of the corporates?
Well, I mean, we've kind of started to put this together in our animation a little bit. I think for people that kind of follow this environment, the talk of many years ago was always corporate social responsibility, the whole CSR edge. Increasingly, we're seeing more companies talk about what's called ESG, which is environment, social and governance-led reporting. So that's becoming something that many of, certainly the big companies, are doing. They're struggling, I think, with the social. So many of them, the net zero, I think they've got on board with reasonably quickly. But I think the social, they're still a challenge sometimes in terms of understanding how to meet social objectives and report on that as a company, which is a great opportunity for our sector. So that's driving them. But they're also, as the public sector moves into more community benefit orientated contracts, the community wealth building agenda, as more contracts come out in that way, I think that inclusion of social enterprises in a tender at a bidding stage, I think they can start to give a bit of a competitive edge to a tender. So I think that will become increasingly important. And I think, again, if you follow the news, I think we've seen companies recently that have struggled to raise investment because they've not been seen as perhaps more ethically and socially aware. So I think, whether it's about attracting customers, attracting investors, attracting people to come and work for you, there's lots of reasons, I think, why it's good for mainstream business to kind of really take an active interest in that environmental and social impact that they can have, because I think ultimately it can be good for their business too.
Thanks for that. And if social enterprises want to become involved, how can they do so? And I know that you ran your boot camp kind of very recently, didn't you?
We ran a boot camp recently, again, trying to get key speakers talking to social enterprises about things to consider. The videos for all of those and some resource files will come out on our website when it launches. And if people are interested in being listed on that site, we would love to hear from you. Simply send an email is probably the best. So that's bisocial@socialenterprise.scot, bisocial@socialenterprise.scot. And we would follow up with you then in terms of the directory includes kind of photos, a little bit of text about your products and services. And we also ask people to kind of say who their current customers are. So it gives a buyer an idea of the kind of scale of a potential supplier. But we can chat that through with you. And if you are looking to get ready even to prepare to be on that listing, I always say I'd encourage you to really know that you've got some good images about your organisation, some good photos, and really prep and be really clear about what it is that the product and services that you have, and think about that from a corporate perspective. Again, we're trying to be really flexible with social enterprises to think about it in a way that could be, again, I've talked about things like team building days, but what would be the context in which someone might want to buy your service from the commercial sector if it's not traditional? So really think that through. But we would love to hear from you, and just drop us an email and we will look to pick up with you and get you listed on the directory.
Great. Thanks, Naomi. So it looks like it's really easy to get involved. That's all we have time for. And thank you very much, Naomi, for taking part in today's podcast. And remember that there are plenty other videos, social media graphics, and podcasts to check out as part of Third Sector Collaboration Week. And you can also get involved using the hashtags Collaborate to Innovate and also hashtag Third Sector Collab Week. And that's third with the number 3. Not spelled out like THIRD. Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the chance to collaborate. It was brilliant.
No worries. Bye now.
Bye-bye.